Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Here we go. Stephen Meyer, Dr. Stephen Meyer. I am now going to ask you the questions I ask all my guests. They are metaphysical. I know that will not be challenged for you as a brilliant philosopher in many ways. And I look up to you so much in the work that you do. You have such a cheerful demeanor, such a wonderful attitude. I do believe that you are the way a thinking intellectual should be. You should consider all sides. You should do so with grace and composure, and you do it so wonderfully well. Now, with that buttering up, I'm going to ask you the tough questions. What do you say about the allegations made on 60 Minutes? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, the first question I ask all my guests is, what would you put in your ethical will? In Hebrew, we have a concept known as a Zava'ah, or ethical will. It's a type of will not materialistic, but wisdom-based. What would you put in a wisdom will for future generations of your ideological, if not biological, heirs?
Maybe it's what you were just talking about taking the militancy out of a discussion like this. And there's militant theists as well. And,
yes.
And these are the great questions, right, that we've been discussing. And they're fun and they're engaging and they're worth talking about. And so I've often felt a kinship with people on the opposite side of the debate, if you will, who are maybe more on the materialistic, naturalistic, atheistic side, agnostic side,
right?
Because they share that common interest in the deep questions. So I would say my ethical will would be a grant of interest in the big questions.
Very nice. Yeah, I always say debate, but do it with love. Second question relates to Arthur C. Clarke. I'm the co-director of the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination at UC San Diego. And you may remember from the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, these primates come upon this enormous monolith, and they don't know what to do with it. They hit it with a bone or two, and then later on you see it, on the moon surface, etc. And it's basically a time capsule, and it's meant to last 1 billion years. And it was similar to the time capsule made by that great atheist and his wife, who was a guest on my show, Carl Sagan and
Anne, yeah.
Anne Jurian. Was a wonderful person. And they made the Voyager Golden Disk, which is lasting billions of years, as NASA told them. I want to ask you, what would you put on a 1 billion-year time capsule that would encapsulate everything that humanity stands for, or that we've learned or we've grown from, or maybe a warning? What would you put on such a piece of material?
First of all, anyone who found such a piece of material, as in 2001 Space Odyssey, would be making a design inference based on the information contained therein.
That's right.
So, but couldn't resist. Well, I put the Magna Carta. I put the 10 Commandments. I put I'd probably put the U.S. Constitution. I'd put the Principia. And I probably put a lot of the great works of 20th century science. So, yeah. There's also a passage from the Hebrew Bible that I love. Psalm 111. There's a part of it that's inscribed on the Cavendish laboratory door in Cambridge, the old Cavendish. It was put there by James Clerk Maxwell. It says, "Great are the works of the Lord, sought out by all who take pleasure therein." And further on in that passage, there is the line, "He has caused his wonders to be remembered." And that's something I often inscribe in books as I'm writing. I think part of what we're seeing is the handiwork of God, and I think it's great to bear witness to that.
Absolutely, yes. I often put on, the heavens declare the handiwork of God. Well, that's very good. Actually, I asked the same question to Anne Jurian, and she quoted from the prophet Micah, and she said, or Micah, she said, "Act justly and love mercy." And I said, "Anne, you're forgetting one last line of that. Walk humbly with your God."
Beautiful.
And she said, "Yeah, I know, but it's still a great wisdom." I have a lot of respect for her. She's a lovely human being. Okay, the last question, Stephen. We've gone forwards in time with your ethical will, not your material will. Now we're going to go backwards in time, not a billion years backwards, but actually just back to when you were a 20-year-old lad, as you talk about a little bit of your upbringing in the book and some of the conflicts you had. It's a very deeply personal book, I think, as well. It's exquisitely scholastic and scholarly, and I'm just so pleased I could play an infinitesimal role in this book. And I hope it's the beginning of a mutual series of dialogues about maybe Judaism and Christianity and science.
We should do more of this. Yeah,
it would be a lot of fun for me.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
The last question allows you to go backwards in time, as Sir Arthur C. Clarke said. The only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible. And that's the name of this podcast. So I want to ask you, what baffled you about life as a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, perhaps just starting off your career, your life, your family, whatever? What baffled you but makes sense today because you, Stephen, had this rare gift of courage to go into the impossible?
Well, I'd go back a little bit further than 20 to 14. I had an existential crisis as a young teenager. I broke my leg in a skiing accident. I had an overly active mind. Nothing was going right at the time at school or in my family. And I started to have these questions that would percolate into my consciousness. I don't know where they came from. They were completely unwelcome, but questions about the one that formulated itself most clearly was, what's it going to matter in 100 years? I could think of everything that I had done in a day, and it all seemed rather pointless. And it was furthermore going to be repeated by virtually the same routine in the next day. And while I was reading, or while I was convalescing from my skiing accident, I had a full leg cast, was kind of confined to bed, and I was reading a book about the history of baseball. I was hugely fanatical about baseball at the time. But after I'd read the stories of each of these great heroes of yesteryear from the sport, I found that they all had the same kind of trajectory. They came up through the minor leagues, they were scouted, they were full of promise, they made the big leagues, they accumulated records, they won World Series, they won home run titles or batting championships. Then their statistical output started to decline. They retired. They enjoyed the rest of their life with the celebrity that came from being a sports star, but then eventually they died. And all that was left was these records on a piece of paper. And I got to think, what? So that's it? I mean, the thing that I thought was the highest thing a person could do, be a professional baseball player, resulted in kind of this empty feeling I had at reading these stories. And then I started to think, well, how is it different for anything else you could accomplish in life? And I got this sense of, well, what's it going to matter in 100 years? There must be something that doesn't change, that and time bothered me a great deal. This kind of constant flux of impressions, sense impressions going by, and there was nothing that seemed stable or consistent. And I thought there must be something that doesn't change, that gives meaning or coherence to everything that constantly does change. And for me, it was. I was 14 at the time, and then I had the existential crisis came, and thinking that probably there was something wrong with me for asking these questions. I began to worry that maybe I was insane, and it just put me in a downward spiral of fear about thoughts that were questions that I couldn't answer. And it was later in college that I encountered a lot of the same questions in the existential philosophers, and I remember sharing with my philosophy professor, I told him about the experience that I had as an adolescent, and I now realized I wasn't insane. I was just a philosopher. And he said, careful, there's a fine line between philosophy and insanity. But I think for me, the thing that I found personally was conviction that there was actually a God, and that there was an ultimate purpose to human existence. There's nothing can mean anything to a rock or an atom or a planet. But things acquire meaning, or meaning is conferred by persons in relation to other persons. And if there is, in fact, a personal God behind the physical universe, then I think this search for meaning that all of us have as humans, as I say at the end of the book, need not end in vain. And for me, it didn't.
Stephen, I want to thank you so much for going into the impossible. I wish you the success and blessing and happiness that you are so richly deserving of. And I hope we'll meet again for more of these stimulating impossible conversations. And I hope it won't take 14 billion years of evolution and design for us to come together again.
Fantastic. These conversations are often impossible because of that underlying hostility that we talked about between different groups. But I think we've made it possible this morning thanks to your great questions. So thanks for having me on. Really good.
Best of luck.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.